All right, now let me give you the major health story that may improve your life if you take this to heart. This is being covered by Reuters, so I have to tell you, it's out there, but it's not on television. What if I told you that eliminating one thing from your diet could keep you from having cancer growth in your body? Would you do it? Or would you say, I'm not giving up my XYZ? Well, here it is. Pancreatic tumor cells use fructose to divide and proliferate. U.S. searchers have now just figured this out, and now it's common knowledge that all sugars are not the same. Tumor cells fed by glucose and fructose use the two sugars in two different ways. Now, this is a University of University of California at Los Angeles study that was done and found that their finding, which has now been published in the journal Cancer Research, but do you hear Dr. Sanjay Gupta talking about this? I don't think so. Why? It's called their advertisers. That's the reason, because fructose syrup is in almost every single thing that people use. Anyway, they said that their finding, which has now been published in the Journal of Cancer Research, may help explain other studies that have been linked with fructose intake, such as pancreatic cancer, one of the deadliest cancer types. These findings show that cancer cells can readily metabolize fructose to increase proliferation. In other words, there are some cells that will feed on sugar. It keeps the individual cell alive. Then there is fructose, which will help the cell divide and multiply. That's the bottom line of what they're saying here. So what if you give your children fructose-laden ketchup? Well, if they have a bad pancreatic cancer cell, for example, it will help it not only to grow, but to divide and increase and multiply. That's why the new organic ketchup that is made by, I think it's Heinz, which I'm not a fan of Heinz, obviously, but it does not have any fructose syrup, corn syrup in it. This has major significance for cancer patients, because there are many cancer patients that will still eat cancer-laden fructose corn syrup or cancer-laden food. I mean, there are cancer patients that don't know that nitrites and nitrates in the lunch meat, in salami, in whatever prepared meats like that, have dangerous items for them. They still eat them. So like they're getting the chemo to kill the cancer and yet increasing it with their diet. So this has really major significance for cancer patients, especially those that, I mean, if you're trying to get rid of your cancer and you keep eating fructose, well, what do you think is going to happen? Americans take in huge amounts of fructose, mainly in high fructose corn syrup, which is a mix of fructose and glucose. It's used in soft drinks, in bread, and other foods. Politicians, regulators, health experts, and the industry have debated whether high fructose corn syrup and other ingredients make people fatter and less healthy. Now, you see, that's a debate they're going to want to continue for years and years and years, because that's the way they keep from saying, well, we don't have an answer, we're just debating the problem. Several states, including New York and California, have a tax now. I'm not for that either, but it's a tax on sweet and soft drinks, because they say it's going to help defray the cost of treating diseases such as heart disease, diabetes, and cancer that the drinks cause. Well, the American Beverage Association, whose members, I might add, include Coca-Cola and Kraft Foods, have strongly and almost violently fought this tax on sodas. The industry has also argued that sugar is sugar. They're trying to get you to believe that any sugar is the same as another sugar. It's not true. Olhini and his team found otherwise. What they did was they grew pancreatic cancer cells in laboratory dishes. Then they fed them, part of them they fed glucose. Part of them they fed fructose. Well, the tumor cells thrive on sugar. In other words, they continue to live. We all know that cancer requires sugar to live. That's why people think, well, I'll give up all the sugar except for wine, and I'll drink my wine at night. Wine has sugar. So tumor cells thrive on sugar, but they use the fructose to multiply. Importantly, fructose and glucose metabolism are quite different. This paper has a lot of public health implications, listeners. Hopefully, at the federal level, there will be some effort to step back on the amount of high fructose corn syrup that is in every single thing that's in either a packaged item practically or a canned item. Now the team hopes to develop. Now see, this is what drives me crazy, because not only are they going to, I mean, they tell you this, which the obvious thing would be to stop eating anything with fructose in it, right? Oh no, that makes way too much sense. The team that did this study, what do they want to do? You talk about stupid news. The team hopes to develop a drug that might stop tumor cells from making use of fructose. What? They're going to develop a drug, a prescription drug that you can take so that fructose will not cause cancer. This really, I mean, all you have to do is quit eating it. That would be too easy. But people don't want to do that. You know, I have to tell you, I'm still obsessed over watching people's baskets when I go into the grocery store. I don't care what grocery store it is. I mean, you can even go in Whole Foods and you can still see a lot of people eating just absolutely junk. But mainly, you know, at China Central grocery store, you know, the great big, you know, box store, grocery store, the great big one that's attached to another store, you know, that sells everything else in the world made in China. But the food there that people get that call it food, they say, I'm going food shopping. You've got anything but food in that basket. And you see 4 little kids hanging on the side of the basket, and you realize what they're going to be sent home to eat, and it just makes you absolutely ill. Anyway, U.S. consumption of high fructose corn syrup went up 1,000% from 1970 to 1990. Why? Was it because you and I went out looking for high fructose corn syrup in our food? No. It was because they placed it in everything. Oh, and at the same time, did we mention that diabetes went up about that amount also? I just would feel so good if I knew that every listener to the Power Hour is looking at high fructose corn syrup when they go to the grocery store today. This is going to be in the email blast. Send it to everybody that you know. I mean, is it not absolutely insane? If you know this right now, what I just told you about high fructose corn syrup in your food, and you go out and you eat it again or buy it again, and if you're eating at a restaurant, guess what? You're getting it without your knowledge. It just isn't listed anywhere, unless you ask for a list of all the ingredients. Some restaurants will give that to you now. But are we not absolutely insane for eating high fructose corn syrup now that this study is out? Now, that commercial on TV about, you know, why it's okay to eat high fructose corn syrup because nobody can think of a reason why not to. You know, that stupid commercial. Well, now that you've got this, everybody ought to keep this. It's from Reuters. Cancer cells slurp up fructose. U.S. study finds. That is huge, listeners. That ought to take up the whole hour. We ought to focus on it and obsess over it and get people to stop eating high fructose corn syrup. That, right there. I mean, they just did a study on pancreatic cancer. What if they did a study on all other kinds of cancers? Would they find also that high fructose corn syrup encourages the proliferation and multiplying of the bad cells? Well, something's doing it. Why does every other person have cancer in this country? And why is it that the #1 cause of death in children, in young children in this country, is cancer? Did you know that? All right, one other thing I want to mention in the health arena. Scientists discovered that olive oil directly impacts the genes to halt inflammation. Now, we ought to go back to Scripture. What does Scripture tell us to eat? And we ought to have a program one day just on biblical food. And you know what? That's what I'm trying to eat now, is biblical food, called God's food, not man's food. And I want to see if 30 days without veering off of that is going to make a difference. You know, I took my blood pressure, did my weight, did all those things, measurements, everything. I want to know. Well, research has been steadily accumulating that olive oil, a main component of what is called the Mediterranean diet, has extensive health protective properties. For example, phytonutrient components of olive oil have been found to be effective against breast cancer cells. And studies suggest the abundance of olive oil in the Mediterranean style of eating may be the reason that the diet helps prevent depression. Now scientists have discovered that phenolic compounds in olive oil directly repress genes linked to inflammation. That's why diets high in olive oil and curcuma